What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. There's a couple of changes that are taking place in the next patch, on patch 6.10, that have really piqued my interest since they're the kind of thing that are probably going to bring rise to off-meta builds and new playstyles, and I love seeing that type of thing take place. At first, when I saw them, I wasn't entirely sure what to make of it, since I thought that they were maybe just experimental changes on the PBE, which is always a tough thing to think about. But a couple of days ago I heard confirmation from the RIOT design team on a live stream that these changes will make it into patch 6.10, and I was able to hear some of their thoughts on the topic and essentially get a rundown. It's a super interesting thing that, although it might not have some massive meta changing effects on the champions affected by it, it will potentially bring rise to some previously off meta builds that might become good, and is also an interesting direction to take with that type of design concept. So anyway, the change that I'm talking about that will be taking place is that specifically Nocturne and Shyvana will be getting new AP ratios in places where they previously didn't have them. Nocturne is getting somewhere around a 0.5 AP ratio on his passive, while Shyvana is getting a 0.1 AP ratio on her W and a 0.025 ratio on her W bonus damage on basic attacks. But we'll get to the details of those two changes in just a minute, because this is a conversation that actually starts with the recently changed Ginsu's Rage Blade and the overall conversation with hybrid items and the hybrid playstyle, since that is the main catalyst for these new AP ratios being added in. And you might be asking, what the heck does the new Ginsu's Rage Blade have to do with anything? That item kinda sucks. And you'd be right. That item pretty much does kind of suck, at least right now. Hybrid items in general have always been an interesting case. When they're good, they're usually just way too good and they get nerfed into oblivion, like we saw with the previous Ginsu's Rage Blade earlier in the season. And when they're bad, they just don't really make the cut for anyone, since there will be better items to build, or it will be better to just build straight up AD or AP instead of something that's hybrid. And that's pretty much been true throughout all of League of Legends history for the most part. There's never really been like a super balanced but still pretty good, solid hybrid item that gets built often, not because it's broken, but because it's just a solid option and you happen to be in a situation that merits it. And a big part of why this happens is really just the inherent nature that hybrid items happen to be forced into. Hybrid items in general are typically, by nature, super overloaded. I mean, take a look at Ginsu's Rage Blade. It gives you attack damage, ability power, attack speed, and on-hit damage. And on top of that, you get the Ginsu's Rage passive. That's just so much stuff chalked into one item. Because it's a hybrid item, it has to have a whole bunch of different stats thrown into it, to where if it's actually worth getting, it's just totally broken because the amount of stats you get is insane. And if it's not worth getting, then it just totally sucks because the stats aren't worth it, and it's tough to make use of every single stat on an item like this anyway. But Ginsu's is kind of a weird example to use, I guess. It's only really a hybrid item in the sense that it just gives you ability power and attack damage, but with the changes to it that took place on patch 6.9, RIOT is trying to make Ginsu's Rage Blade the king of on-hit items, to make it almost like the infinity edge of on-hit stats and stuff. They took the old stated Devour effect and instead they put it on an item where it makes a lot more sense, since it's something that is instead gated by its super high cost to purchase, rather than something that you have to farm for 15 minutes to get access to it for cheap. And because of the direction of the Ginsu's Rage Blade change, to make it what is really just on-hit Infinity Edge, of being this huge massive scaling item that synergizes insanely well with other on-hit items, we are seeing what was previously known as the hybrid playstyle evolve into something that is much more on-hit related, involving on-hit items, passives, abilities, and all sorts of stuff, to the point where it just makes a lot more sense than just an item that gives ability power and attack damage. And this is something that I believe we will see develop over the course of the next month or two, and depending on how RIOT decides that they feel about it, it will either become a solid strategy, become meta, or eventually it's just going to be scrapped and the concept will be attempted once again from the ground up. We'll kind of have to see how it plays out. This is the kind of thing that RIOT has been trying for a long time to get right, and this new attempt with that style is one that I see as having a lot of potential, and it especially makes a lot more sense for junglers who are now building Blood Razor to shift towards this type of playstyle. And the problem that the designers have always faced with the hybrid playstyle in the past is that it's very difficult to give a champion both competitive AP and AD ratios. A champion having competitive AP and AD ratios is kind of what's needed for them to be successful in a traditional hybrid style of play. But if you give a champion any type of competitive ratio, they'll just build full AP or AD respectively. Since the ability power and attack damage items are just so much better, more versatile, and just have so much more going for them and more options than the hybrid items, to where unless the hybrid items are actually broken, you're never going to build them, and that never really lasts for long. So by making a champion have a viable hybrid playstyle, you pretty much always make them totally overpowered in a non-hybrid playstyle, as a result of the problems that occur because of the hybrid items being subpar, or at least that's what's happened until now. This Ginsu's Rageblade change is headed in a direction to fix that, where a traditional hybrid style of just a bunch of AD and AP will likely cease to exist, and will be replaced by the on-hit playstyle that incorporates a bunch of hybrid elements with it. Now with that said, this direction that the hybrid style is headed is one that I think is really cool. It's certainly going to be a lot more viable and has a lot more potential, and is probably going to open up new playstyles that are still good, whereas previously they might have been just completely unviable. The on-hit style is one that has a lot less problems inherently than a traditional hybrid one does. And as for the Nocturne and Shyvana changes specifically, it's done in a way that's pretty solid. They aren't making full AP Nocturne or full AP Shyvana become a strong option by any means whatsoever because they aren't competitive ratios. Rather, they're just adding in a token AP ratio to Nocturne and Shyvana in places that weren't there before, so that when you do happen to have AP, or maybe you want to build Rageblade, it just makes a little bit more sense. And this type of change is one that a lot of champions in the game could benefit from. There's probably like 20 or 30, maybe even more, and give them room for this type of on-hit playstyle to be quite successful. And it's likely that we'll see this type of small little buffs being introduced to additional champions after patch 6.10 if Riot decides that this playstyle is something that they want to try and make work. I guess one problem though this design could potentially create is that this on-hit style is something that they're trying to make work for on champions that might not necessarily want it. Sure, someone like Kog'Maw might totally love the new on-hit playstyle with the Ginsus and have loads of synergy with it, but on the champions like Shyvana and Nocturne in specific, a full damage on-hit style isn't entirely ideal, since you would really want to pick up some tankiness still, and as a result, you'd avoid the super scaling powerful items. There's a reason why Infinity Edge isn't ever really built outside of the AD carry role. It's because it needs a full damage build of 4 or 5 additional damage items to actually make sense to be worth buying, and these on-hit champions aren't the ones that necessarily want to do that. At least that's what it looks like on paper. But there are maybe some kind of on-hit tank items that could get some popularity with this new playstyle. Wit's End is a good example of this type of thing, and I honestly believe that we might see 1 or 2 brand new items being introduced in the game to complement this playstyle. Going Ginsu's Rageblade as a first item, and then building some tanky-ish on-hit items after that could totally work out with those types of champions and be a pretty awesome style of gameplay. I guess they are targeting this playstyle a bit more towards the on-hit attack speed junglers, the ones who would previously be building Devour and are now building Bloodrazor, and in combo with that some on-hit abilities in their kit, and you might actually not need to build more than just the Bloodrazor and the Ginsu's Rageblade to be effective with dealing damage. And if that new item though does end up not happening, I would be a little bit concerned for the on-hit style actually. I do think that they need at least 1 more additional item. Otherwise it might end up being something that just becomes an option only for AD carries, since the champions they are giving AP ratios to help out with for this style aren't the ones that necessarily want to be investing 10,000 gold into damage items. They might get 1 or 2 damage items, but certainly not 4 or 5 like an AD carry would, so it might run into some problems if there isn't a new item that's introduced or a previously existing item that is reworked to complement this playstyle. As we mentioned in the beginning of the video, the big problem with the hybrid, or I guess now the on-hit style rather, is just a lack of items that make sense to build, so the champions that can actually build it and make it work would often rather just build AP or AD items instead. However, it is potentially possible that the new Bloodrazor jungle enchant is that new item that this playstyle needs, and will fit nicely alongside Ginsu's as well. I'm not totally counting out the fact I'm just a little bit skeptical of the whole thing is all. The fact that they are adding AP ratios to make this playstyle a lot more sense for those champions though is totally awesome, and it's a great step in a great direction. And with that said, I for one am super excited to see how these changes, these new AP ratios on Nocturne and Shyvana will work out. It's certainly an interesting thing to try out, and I'm glad Riot is headed in the direction that they are with this, and I think it has a lot of potential. And that's going to be it for me today. What do you guys think about these new AP ratios? Leave a comment, subscribe if you want. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.